Hey everybody, welcome back to Private Club Radio. I'm your host, comedy magician, the club entertainer, Denny Corby. Hope everyone is having a fantastic time of day whenever you are listening. This is an interesting episode because we talk about how well do you really know your members and the people you're bringing in to your club. I'm going to bring on Paul Dank of Kennis / member vetting, and they are all about doing the background research. So they help uncover the true personalities of potential members. They know how to find people's ghost social media accounts. And we're going to go over what a ghost account is. It is fascinating because we talk about how Kennis, leverages public records and open source information to find data points that are relevant to the individuals, because Google is pretty limiting actually. And there is a much, much bigger web out there, and they know how to uncover hidden details about your potential members and evaluate kind of how an individual's, values and culture can be crucial when considering membership at your club. I find this totally fascinating. This is wild. We talk about some cool stories. I join you in welcoming a very interesting episode of Private Club Radio. Please welcome from member vetting / Kennis, my new friend, Paul Dank. This is just like really fascinating. And to me, I thought this would have been like a common practice. So why don't you kind of get us up to speed? Who are you? What do you, Kennis, and member vetting do? And we'll take it from there.
So my name is Paul Dank, and I'm the president of a company called ASG Investigations. And maybe 5.5 years ago, ASG was approached we had a client in the private equity space who was on the board at a club, and the club had a unique problem. The problem was there were essentially two camps of people within the club who were very divisive toward one another. And what they found is they had something in common. They were from the same ethnic group, and they were all in the same line of business, either working for company A, whose owner and president was a member, or company B, who was the rival and the competitor. And it got to the point where it was so bad, there were fisticuffs at the Easter cotillion, and it was bad. And what they said is, what they want to do is to try and vet out who was being nominated by anybody in either one of these camps to say, do they work in that business? And are they going to have the same kind of ill will toward their competitor? Because we're going to say, no, we're just going to stop adding fuel to the fire. And so it was unusual, and we'd never really done work for private clubs. And so we started doing this. And shortly after that, general manager left and went to work for another club. And he said, I don't have that problem anymore, but I don't want to go without what you give me. And after a couple of cups of coffee, what we sort of learned was that the applicant controls most of the information in the process, even if they're nominated by a great member. That member probably doesn't know as much about them as they think they do. And even if they do know one set of facts, there might be information in the background that tells a different story. And clubs care about the character of the person. It's not just about, are they a threat? Something, obvious, like that person is a criminal, right? But they need to see who the people really are. And he loved it, and he took us with him. So then we were at two clubs. Well, then somebody else went to another club, and they told a friend. And all of a sudden, we had 5 or 6 clubs that we were doing this kind of due diligence on. We looked at it as a line of business and sort of learned that the club industry hasn't really changed much in their vetting process in probably 150 years. It's usually a combination of there's a nomination, there's some kind of a meet and greet, and then maybe you post the club's or you post the applicant's name on the club website for members to come and speak up about if they know something. And maybe last but least is you do some kind of a pedestrian background check, similar to what's found in employee screening. The problem with those is, again, you have people that nominate somebody for membership for a variety of reasons, and they don't always know the person that well. They don't have that lifelong bond. They're not their lawyer, psychiatrist, doctor, godfather to their children. It's just somebody that you know, and you got along with them in some context, so you invite them. Or maybe
Right.
it's the person pushed you to invite them. They're a vendor, they're a client, they're a friend of a friend. I have a sister-in-law who lives about an hour and a half from us. She and her husband went to dinner with my wife and I at my club. And 2 or 3 weeks later, she calls and says, "Need to nominate somebody for membership in your club." And I said, "Who is this person? Why am I doing this?" And she said, "I don't even know the guy, but his girlfriend is really important to my business. And, I told her we went to dinner there and she's, wants him to get in the club." So, I think those kinds of situations happen a lot more than people maybe take into account. The other thing is, when it comes to a meet and greet, right? You're gonna have a cocktail reception for prospective members, or you're gonna have a board member take somebody out for lunch in 9 holes. I would argue that even Vladimir Putin can get through one of these sessions without screwing it up. You're being watched. You have to be on your best behavior. You have a vested interest in getting in the club, so you're going to act however they want you to act. And the people that are doing the evaluating are trained in evaluations. So these are everyday folks, and I'm sure they're incredibly smart. We can all be really smart, but also really bad judges of character. The only way to be a good judge of character is to know a lot about the person ahead of time and then spend a great deal of time observing them when they have their guard down and they're behaving naturally. A meet and greet or 9 holes to meet a board member doesn't cut it. So again, you're not going to get a lot of information that applicant doesn't want you to have. Then when it comes to posting names, I love this because it's effective. When you have a member who knows something and is willing to come forward. But in truth, I've been a long-time member of my club. I miss a lot of those emails. So I don't see who's on the list. I'm not paying attention. You have that. You have a combination of things where I've heard really bad things about this person, but I've heard them from someone else. I don't know it firsthand. So I'm not going to step forward. Maybe you get people who just don't want to get engaged in the process. I don't want to run into this person at Piggly Wiggly and have a confrontation. I don't want to see them at church and there's an issue. I was the person that blackballed them. And so I think it's limited. It's great when it works, but it's limited. And then last but not least, to do a pedestrian background check. And I would venture to say that there are very few people who are recently released from prison who want to run out and drop $80,000 to join a country club. If you can afford a country club and you just got out of prison, you're probably worrying about behaving for a while and not your social network. So I think that it just falls short. And so we saw this opportunity and we wanted to take it slow and really learn from our GMs and our membership directors. Are we adding value and are we really providing something that's meaningful? And every club that signed up with us has stayed with us. So it's really been fantastic. And I think we've come across the new best practice in large part because if you think about most of the private club members, these are folks that come from the top 1% of society. I think they expect some level of vetting. They expect to have people that are there for the same reasons they are. Social reasons, people that are aligned with the club in its culture and its values. And unfortunately, you get a whole bunch of people who want in for all kinds of reasons. And there are predictive things in their past that are likely to show up again and therefore make them preventable from happening at your club to fellow members, to guests, to staff. You can stop it at the onset. And the final piece is most clubs find it much easier and much less drama-filled bar someone entry in a club than to kick them out. And so here we are. And it's been great so far. Met lots of fantastic people and I feel like we're really helping. So it's been neat.
So about how many steps would you say is like the average vetting process? Like four steps or so?
Well, yeah, in traditional vetting, it could be up to 4. And there are some clubs, don't get me wrong, there are some clubs that do more exotic things. They say you have to have, you have to have 6 nominations and you have to come before a panel of people. I think you have to look at how exclusive the club is and who you are. If you're already a U.S. senator, there probably isn't a lot that's unknown about you and the vetting process can go quicker. But I think if you're someone who is moving from, a club with maybe a $30,000 initiation fee, and now they're going to go to $100,000 club and it's a whole new pool of people, that club may have more steps. But the 4 is pretty much the limit, at least as far as we've seen on any kind of a larger scale.
So what would separate your process then from like a normal
Sure.
vetting?
So what we do in terms of what is the fact-based due diligence portion of it is we look for information that's available and open, publicly available information. And we're at a really interesting time in terms of the evolution of technology and living in a free country. And so what I would argue is that right now there has never been more information available about Americans waiting to be found, if you know where to look for it, than at any point in history. And we're now leaving footprints with the advent of social media and so much data going online. We're putting footprints about people out there that they don't know are there. So it's not that I'm posting things on social media that talk about me. Somebody that might be 2 and 3 steps away from me is posting a photograph and tagging me in it and putting me at a place. Or I'm part of an association and I did something for the association and somebody else memorialized it and it's out there waiting to be found. So Kennis looks not only for things like public records, meaning court documents and police runs to houses, those sorts of things. We also look at all of the information that's available through open source on the web. And it's crazy abundant. And I think where there's a little bit of a disconnect with people in terms of what we can find versus what they can find is Google. Google is the problem child. I love Google. Most of us think of Google as a replacement for God because you will type things in there that you won't tell your doctor or your lawyer or your spouse. When you're at your darkest moments, you get on Google and start typing things looking for help. The problem with Google is Google realistically indexes less than 5% of the web. So that means the other 95% of that information could be responsive, could have important things, but it's not Google worthy. And remember, Google is a private company. They have their own agenda and they want to put forth and pull information that they deem to be relevant. There's also a whole bunch of information out there that's unstructured or semi-structured, meaning you need an expert to look for it and say, that's actually connected to Denny. That's not nothing. There's something here and here's how I can find it. So we go in and we look for all of that information that's available. And the way it really works is you have an individual and they have a sphere. You have your sphere that you create. And then maybe you have a spouse and she creates a sphere and there's overlap. And then you have kids and you have Nam and you have Grandpa Joe and you have your 2 buddies from college and you have the person you used to work for and the hilarious bartender. And we have all these spheres and they grow. Those people all may have potential information that leads back and points to you and your character. And my team has to be able to, number 1, identify them, and number 2, search for anything that's relevant. So we're able to harvest a lot of information. I'm not saying that everybody in America has lots of information out there. There are plenty of us who are really boring and have almost no footprint. But the point is, we can look at that information, present that to our clients so that they can look at it and say, number 1, is everything that we were told true? Are we starting this relationship out with lies and embellishment to get in the club? And then secondary, what didn't they tell us about that we should probably know and would be apropos to ponder as part of the membership decision process? So when I say that the applicant really controls everything, they do. They control everything that's on the paper. Most of the time they control what the sponsor is saying about them and knows about them. They've probably been controlling what they see. And then they go home and they have, their doll head collection in the basement with a couple people chained up. We don't always know that. And so the idea is we're able to look for all of the information that's already available, waiting to be found, and coalesce it into one report, and then make it easy for a client to look through and say, okay, there's something relevant for me to pay attention to or not.
Gotcha. Now, when you're pooling all of this data and let's say you find that person, how many chained up bodies are too many?
I think you have to look, if your club is more goth based, I would say, you can have 3 or 4 bodies in the basement. That decision really comes down to culture. And if you think about it, America's a pretty diverse place and our clubs are very diverse. So there are clubs, let's say in Washington or Northern California, who are very much opposed to a lot of conservative ideas. And I think that they find that if somebody is taking a strong stance on that, or maybe already doing things on the internet that violate your decorum policy, and they're going to be toxic to your culture and your community, maybe it's just not a good fit. Remember, I look at member vetting as, is the person going to fit in here? Does it make sense for them to be here? Forget about the fact that they want to be here or they think they want to be here, right? Forget about their motives. Are they really going to be a good member of our community? Because that's what a club is all about. And that's what I expect out of my club is there's a sense of camaraderie and community. And when you get a toxic personality, or maybe that's just a personality that's not a good fit, let alone someone who's a threat, that's what you're using this tool for, or are capable of using it for, if you wish.
Yeah. After our talk, we were having a conversation. I think we had like one or two talks before you were teaching me about everything. And because I just find like just different industries fascinating as well. And my head immediately kept going towards negative, but this isn't not just a bad thing. It's really, it is just information to see if they're going to be a good fit or not. Because that is really what it boils down to. Like, this isn't just about like, hey, did they do bad things? This is just getting information about them together.
Yeah, really, does the narrative they provide pan out? Is it accurate? Clubs use some in there. I guess there's another informal approach that clubs can use, and I recommend it. And that's to reach out if the person claims that they were a member of another club or are elsewhere, to reach out to that club. Now, that club may not always respond. That's something we can assist with as well. But I think that's another great way to help with your vetting process, because if someone has been a successful member in the club environment somewhere else, they get how the game is played and they're actively getting into something they understand. I have met at my club multiple people who it was their first club experience and it's not what they expected, right? And so they probably aren't going to stick around very long because they're not getting out of it what they thought they were. Or they're doing it just for business development reasons and things like that. And it turns out in the end, it's just not a good fit. But that's a big part of it, is trying to help them with that fit. And if they have prior club experience, that's usually a big win.
Do you have any like cool examples of how, you've helped clubs make more informed kind of membership decisions?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we constantly are finding, we're constantly finding information that is of interest to our clients and helps them. The negative is probably the easiest to focus on. So there was a club that recently, because it's pretty obvious, right? There's a club that had an individual apply for membership, and her spouse was going to come along, and the spouse, unfortunately, the spouse was not currently on the sex offender registry, but had been. And so in a traditional FCRA compliant employment screening background check, you would not have seen that. The person was off the list. It was too far out of date. I think if you end up on that list, you're probably better suited somewhere else, especially a family-oriented club. And so, yeah, I think that the wife applied specifically so that there wouldn't be any eyes on the husband, right? I think that's a pretty easy one. We found one where recently where we have a gentleman who owns quite a few properties in New York City and is, through his holdings, is arguably a slumlord. And there's been multiple articles and Reddits and blogs about the fact that person does the very minimum to keep the regulators from seizing the buildings, but leaves people in impoverished filth, and then is in Connecticut applying to join a country club. So those examples of, again, talk about character. You have to understand there's also, even though people have money, they still behave the same. There's a certain percentage of us that like to present well where we want to, and then we show our true selves in ways like we set up ghost accounts, right? So I'm going to have 3 or 4 ghost social media accounts where I'm going to trash your podcast anonymously. Well, anonymous is more difficult when I'm looking for you. And we can find many of those ghost accounts and link them back to the people and show what their true colors are. So we've had many of the examples where people have these ghost accounts and they're spreading hate. They're spreading all kinds of messages. They're ostensibly terrorizing people, and then they're going to go and golf 9. And so when you don't look, it's not going to come up. But it's nice to know about those personalities when you get them. We had another club where there was a sad situation. The club had an applicant. The couple was great. They do everything right, but they had an adult son who enrolled in college out of state. He got to the college and there's something wrong with him, I'm guessing, made a comment to someone in his dormitory that if he didn't get into the fraternity he was rushing and his assigned roommate did, apparently had problems with the roommate, that he was going to kill the roommate and then kill himself. And that he had the guns and was going to do this. So now, meanwhile, the club and mom and dad are far away. But what happens when wealthy people get into legal trouble? They muster all the resources and great attorneys. And what they did is they convinced the judge in the state where the university was to remand him to the parents' custody in their state far away with the agreement he would never come back to the state. And then rather than going to prison, he could reside there. The problem was, the club that mom and dad were applying to, until you're age 23, the adult children are free to use the club independently as much as they want. And so the club was going to get great mom and dad, and they were going to get, hopefully, a young man who's getting care and wouldn't be a problem. But that's a big if, right? If just a few months before you were going to kill someone because you were disappointed about a decision, and then yourself, I question whether that's the right time for him to be at the club.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
kind of heavy.
Wow. Yeah.
And then, we the other examples, I guess, are the easy ones, right? Where you get someone who, you get someone who is openly and publicly doing something like fat shaming on social media, right? Sounds ridiculous, but if you're doing that openly on social media and you're calling people out, you're going to behave that way at the club too. And is that, I don't know, that's a personality that fits in anywhere. But that's what you get. If you don't look, again, everybody was smiling and nodding and the check cleared. So under normal circumstances, they'd get in.
That's wild. And you just find that stuff on the normal. It's just, here's another one. Here's another one. Here's a thing.
The vast majority of people are who they say they are. And maybe there's a data point or two that they forgot to mention, or there's something small that they embellished. But you get the people that do things like say, I was a Navy SEAL. Well, no, you were in the Navy, but you weren't a Navy SEAL. So you're starting out the relationship, telling people that you're a SEAL. There's a way to verify whether somebody was. We had that. By the way, we've also had 2 real SEALs who have come through. So they're out there. But, again, you can't fact check if you're not using some kind of a resource like ours to do so. So it just leaves management in an information, dark spot. I'm from Detroit, and people will probably remember this if they're football fans, but Matt Patricia was our head coach of the Lions. And this was really a nothing issue, but a reporter from the Detroit Free Press, I believe, contacted the general manager of the Lions and said, did you know that Coach Patricia, who had already been hired and working there for months, did you know that he was arrested for sexual assault when he was in college? The bad news is management didn't know. They had no clue. And I'll give you the backstory, and they were technically in the right not to know. The problem was the response was, I don't know what you're talking about, which then fueled the fire like napalm. And then it's picked up and it's on the front page of USA Today. Well, Matt Patricia was hired as an employee, and that's a regulated kind of background check. And he wasn't convicted of anything. The problem were all the optics. If he had said, well, of course we know about that, he wasn't convicted of it, and for employment purposes, we can't even consider that, would have been over. Instead, it lasted for days. And trust me, up here, I couldn't turn on sports talk radio for 2 weeks. But the problem was management was uninformed. In the case of most private clubs, they're uninformed. And the arguments against using the service are usually a couple things. It appears invasive. Why do we have to snoop around? Not snooping around. Again, this information already exists. It's, do you want to pay somebody to aggregate it so you can see it? Or do you want to pretend that it's reasonable not to know? I question whether it's reasonable not to know when it's just a few dollars that you're talking about. And what if the person is dangerous and something happens? If somebody wants to really have an eye-opening experience, Google the term country club sexual assault. I stopped looking at 25 pages And it's news story after news story after news story about something that went wrong. Member that attacked a member that brought a guest and attacked the guest, member that attacked staff, children of members who've attacked people. And these aren't clubs that you're thinking are crazy and it can't happen here. It's random and it's everywhere. It's in liberal, conservative, north, south, east, west. It doesn't make a difference. Unfortunately, that's part of it. Here's a bigger problem that comes with that. If something bad happens and the person wasn't vetted, I can guarantee you that two things are going to happen. There'll be a lawsuit, and the plaintiff attorneys are going to hire guys like us to say, let's find everything about this person and their background. And they're going to say, this club let the guy in, but he had all of these things that look like they're building up, right? When you look at predictive behaviors, and we use that throughout all forms of risk management, right? Predictive behaviors. We're no different in our character information. That's what you're using it for. So if you don't look, you're not going to see that things were building up. And we have a series of events, and this person probably isn't stable, but I'm not looking for it. So therefore, I can't be held accountable. And every club has liability insurance, and they'll have an insurance carrier that will get in and represent them. But how does it look to say, no, what we did is we decided not to look at all for any facts. We just decided to go with what people told us. We keep it subjective around here. It's been a tradition for 80 years. It seems rather unreasonable. The other problem that's going to come with this is the story will break in the media. And in the media, what happens is it's not someone broke and did something horrific, right? Which can happen anywhere, any level of society. Instead, it turns into rich people at that club think they can do whatever they want. They think they can behave however they want, and that's what they do at that club. And then you have every member at the club who's now looking at one another in the locker room or across the dining room and saying, who are you really? What do I really know about you? Are you the next flake who's going to come unwound and do something awful? Now, again, awful things don't happen every year at every club. And for many clubs, they don't happen for many, many years. But usually there are arguments that, our community is pretty cohesive and everybody already knows everybody's business. So there isn't a need to look for facts. I would challenge you and say, think of how many times you said, you know what I need in my decision-making? I need less facts. I really want less facts to go with right now. I want to go completely off the cuff and intuition. I'm just, I love that guy's haircut. So he's in.
You're just jealous that he has hair.
We're going to go right there. Okay. We can go right there.
I was not sure. I was like, we're going to go for it. We're going to go for it. And I wasn't sure if that was a dig at me or not.
No, but you do have cool hair. So I'm a little hair jelly.
Thank you. It's okay. It's okay. Oh, maybe I'll have like my editor put like my hair on top of yours. We'll do like a Photoshop thing. Do you do anything in terms of helping clubs like monitor and assess behavior? Is there anything like that? Is that like a thing?
No, no. I think that steps a little far out of our field of expertise.
Okay.
Well,
I just wasn't even sure if that was because, I was just going through the process of my own. Once I get my head on something, I start getting like super excited. So then I was like, oh, I wonder if there's people who will have like lawyers on retainer who like search, make sure no one uses their patents and terms and phrases. So I wasn't sure if you had any, or even if there is any sort of monitoring.
No, there's not.
Service, but that might be a little.
I would say the closest thing we have is when management is made aware of a situation that they think should impact whether somebody should be a member, but they don't have the facts. They're certainly welcome to hire us to see if we can find any hard data points somewhere in the process, because let's face it, that's not what clubs do. I think often what they do is they turn to local counsel who then either hires somebody like us or spends time to try and figure out, is there any documented proof that this happened and that we should act upon it? So we do those things upon request, but, unfortunately reaction mode, right? So no, I don't think there's monitoring.
Yeah.
I think maybe a good point that someone made to me, I was talking to a general manager who is relatively new with us, and he said, it's amazing that what we weren't doing anything fact-based until we started working with you. But I have a daughter who's now applying for college, and I've never seen more due diligence. And if you think about it, college application process and all of the things that they verify, the information that they look at, and all of the information that you have to provide, and yet you can walk into a country club if you've got a check. And just really interesting that he picked up on, look at what we do just to get into a public university, to basically a child, and yet we have clubs that aren't really using any facts in their member voting. So kind of an interesting analogy.
Yeah, I was going to say that's very interesting. Very interesting. Do you have any kind of insights or tips on how to like manage difficult conversations? Because I know you don't fully, you kind of just give over the data and how you analyze it. But do you ever help with like difficult conversations? Because I'm sure there's, you might be putting people into situations or giving them information that they may have never had to deal with before, or like now they have to take this information and present it. Do you any help with that? I don't know.
Help with it? No, but I can sort of empathize a little bit with clubs that don't maybe have a history of saying no. So there are clubs that, because they haven't been doing anything fact-based or any kind of due diligence, and they've been relying on sort of that old traditional tried and true methodology, everybody passes that, right? Everybody's application looks good. Everybody has the check. Everybody is nominated. Everybody manages to get through the meet and greet okay. And so they say yes to everybody when they have a roster slot. It's definitely new for those clubs to then say, okay, we now have brand new sources of information that are impacting the process, and we traditionally haven't dealt with that. The good news is, and this is not legal advice, but clubs legally in America, we're lucky we have some really good elements of the Constitution that guarantee that we can associate with whomever we want. I don't think that means a club should explore using bias against people, especially for protected things like race and gender and ethnicity. And no one's talking about those things. But when it comes to fit, you're allowed to pick who fits and what defines a good fit. So you might be a conservative club down in Texas that says everybody is a Republican business owner, gun owner who hates taxes and loves the police. And we don't really want to bring members in that have radically different viewpoints, because it's probably not going to work. Probably going to end up violating the decorum policy on like day one. And we know who we are, so we identify with a group. And to be honest, think about it this way: if you're selecting a club, you're probably selecting it for one of two reasons. If you are someone who's established, you're picking a club because you want to play golf there and you like the people that are there, or you want to keep your boat there and you like that community of people. The other group are the ones you really have to watch, and those are social climbers. And I understand that everybody has to get to the top from the bottom, but if you're only getting into the club for the name and so you can run around and wear a flag draped around your shoulders that says you're in this club and that's your cloak of legitimacy, I wonder if you are a good fit. Are you actually going to be a good fit with people who are there and they're doing it for purely social reasons? And so I think clubs have to examine themselves and their culture. And remember, saying no isn't difficult. To say to a prospective applicant, the board is not ready to move forward with your application at this time, is pretty easy. And the applicant really doesn't have a leg to stand on. They're not a part of the club, and I think the club is free to do what they want. I think it becomes more difficult to talk to the nominating member than anything else, because you're going to come and say, hey, Paul, you nominated Denny. You really don't know about Denny. I think you have to be very well thought out and planned in the conversation of how to say, the board and the club did its due diligence and we don't feel that it's a good fit at this time. It's not a reflection on you. It's just not the right time for that applicant. And we appreciate that you nominated her or him. And we want you to keep nominating people, but there is something that's given us pause, and it has nothing to do with you. And, for some members, that's not going to work, right? They're going to be upset and they're going to want to know more. And the clubs may have to deal with that, but that's part of being exclusive, right? How can you be exclusive if you haven't excluded anyone? And you have to set the bar somewhere. And that bar may change with the club, just like clubs' personalities change. I was talking to a fantastic club today, and they said, we just had sort of a revitalization at the beginning of COVID, and we're almost a completely different club. We have a different trajectory. Boards are focused on different things, and we're really excited about our future. And I think that happens all the time. But knowing who you are and what you stand for and what is okay, I think that's really important in the process. We were joking around. We have a club that had an older gentleman, this is down south, who applied for membership. And I don't know if you're a pretty young guy. Do you remember David Duke?
Yeah.
So David Duke was the Klans guy in DC, right? And so
yeah,
I couldn't believe it when the report came back and there's all these donations, campaign contributions to David Duke. I don't know how that went with that club. It was the 80s that he was giving the money to Duke, but I don't know how that went with that club, which was also in the South. And maybe that's more forgiven. Could you imagine if I had a club in Portland and I had somebody who was making contribution, right? And so but I think that's sort of the personification of what I'm talking about. Know who you are and what you stand for, what your members stand for. And you get to choose who to associate with. You shouldn't have to be subjected to people that are going to make you miserable. That's not part of it for anybody, I don't think.
No. And it's part of the board to hopefully, if they do a good job, to be a good vibe catcher, as they say. So, I want to leave people with some like tangible things. So if there's just a club or somebody who's just like doing, like they do their own vetting process, as they're just like doing their own normal stuff, are there any like signs or red flags that are just like early indicators that everyone should maybe, like, if they see, go, oh, okay, that might be something to take note on?
Boy, it's hard. One of the things that we're contemplating doing in the second half of this year is to look at a sampling of as many club applications as possible and sort of aggregate information on it and maybe come up with some sample best practices in application building, right? Because I think a lot of times they're very deficient. I mean, it's name, address, phone number. Are you nice? And that's the end of it. I have clubs, believe it or not, I have clubs that are very concerned with someone's actual, golf capability. These are competitive golfing clubs, and they want to make sure that someone is what they say in terms of their golf handicap and their capabilities. So I think you can ask more information up front or ask members to provide more information. I don't have it down to a science yet as to what is going to be the easiest to determine and uncover inaccuracies. Because again, the problem is clubs currently don't have a lot to fact check on. I think if somebody says that they were a member in another private club, you should reach out. Not even if you hear, no, I'm not going to talk to you. You should reach out to that prior club or that other club and find out, at least verify that they are a member and a successful one, and that they haven't been kicked out. That's a huge tell, is if somebody's having problems at a club, they're switching clubs. Because whatever happened at that prior club, I would suggest can probably happen again. And you're looking at onboarding another problem child. I would say that to the degree that a club can, they should look at the civil litigation record locally of an applicant. Here's the problem with doing that. People can live in a lot of places, and they can also have legal problems in other places. So I'm in Detroit. You could arguably sue me in a court in Denver, and there isn't one quickie database that finds all litigation connected to all people. That's for the CSI TV shows. That's not how it works. So you have to know where to look. But if somebody says, I've been in this community for 20 years, you can have someone check and look for that. Because what I would suggest is if someone is being sued constantly, or maybe worse, suing other people constantly. We saw a gentleman who had filed 8 suits for slander libel against different people over the years and had sued 2 clubs previously. So again, I don't pass judgment, but I'm pretty sure he didn't get in. Train wreck.
And I'm just laughing because you said the guy had 2 other clubs he was a member of. So there was no one did their research at all.
Well,
Wow.
again, how do you? He's moved to a state. He's only been in that state for 9
That's
months.
true.
And so you got to look where he was before and then where he was before that. And if you know to look and you know that history. So no, I don't think from a home gamer standpoint, you can say, Sarah, the new intern, is pretty good with the internet. We're going to put her on member vetting. It can't hurt, but I don't think it's going to do what we do, simply because they're not going to be able to search the way we search with the tools we have and the resources. And frankly, we're kind of weird. We have people that do nothing but this online research, and they conference and they have user groups, and they're scary. I don't go back there a lot because they're pretty honed in on their world, and information technology is changing so fast that they have an unlimited amount to keep track of, right? Look at TikTok and how explosively popular it became. It caught us completely flat-footed, and we had to pivot quick and say, it's not like some people are using it, everybody's using it, right? Instagram was the same way. And what can we harvest from that? What can we find? And how do people use that? And how do we find ghost accounts? And how do we dig through that data? So we're always being challenged. We can't see everything, but again, when you have 95% of the information that's dark as far as Google is concerned, a lot of people don't have another play other than Google. Well, I know DuckDuckGo, but it's not a real thing.
That's like a reference only probably 5 people are going to understand.
Well, high five to those 5.
Well, duck you. No. Oh, this was such a fun conversation. I enjoy chatting with you. You crack me up.
I'm here for your amusement. That's
Any other things you'd like to add or talk about?
I'm excited about the changes in the space. It's neat to hear the conversations when facts start to come into play, and there's a lot of stakeholders in a club, and when management can do something, even if it's a small thing, to help prevent something bigger from happening that's negative, I think that's a huge win, and I think the members would be all behind it. There are some people that think that any kind of looking into someone's background is invasive and in poor taste. The reality is it's happening in every other space. There's no chance you and I are going to do a business deal without me checking you out. There's no chance that you're going to, it happens. I can't volunteer at my grandkids' hockey. I can't do any of that without being vetted. So it's happening everywhere. And I think it's accepted. I think, Ronnie Reagan's trust but verify is the new norm, but it hasn't really migrated to the private club space yet. But I see it happening. I'm excited to be part of it. I've made great friends. I love the club community. You get all these type A's in management and clubs, and they're just positive, and it's great because I spent so much of my career cutting my teeth working for angry lawyers or risk managers or professionals that deal with reactive situations. Hey, Paul, something really bad happened. Can you tell us the extent of how crazy the people involved really are? Sure. And so it's nice to be on a proactive and appreciated side of it, and we're having fun. So,
I was going to say, what's the fun part about your job? Like, what gets you excited?
I think the most important part is when clubs say this has been great. I mean, we never would have known. And I don't think this person was going to be a good fit. And they were a shoo-in. They were a lock if we hadn't seen what you helped us with. Then, excuse me, when they say things like the board was really excited with things, I have one of my longest standing GMs who called and said, everything just seems to be humming better. Everybody seems to be rowing in the same direction. There just seems to be less conflict. I went to a very large club that has a huge tennis complex. And the director of tennis asked us to come over to the tennis office. And in the tennis club are 2 clipboards. I might have told you this, you're smirking. And on one of them, it says men, and the other one says women. And it's all conflicts of people that they don't schedule on the courts at the same time because they hate each other. And it just makes their life miserable. And so the poor scheduling desk has to literally say, oh, Denny's on the phone, and then pull up the sheet and look for all the people that you get into it with. And, I mean, what a terrible environment. I feel bad for them. And they said, so when it comes to toxic people and situations, it sure would be great to have a few less of them. And, I don't think with clubs, it's the 80-20 rule. I think it's like the 97-3 rule. I think there is a small minority of members who are awful and clubs wish they could get rid of, who haven't done anything technically wrong. But times are changing. Since I've been in this space actively, we've been out there for maybe, 18 months. And advertising, I've been reading Club Director magazine and Boardroom magazine and trying to soak up as much information as I can. And I see a lot of articles about how the club environment is changing as people are changing, right? Used to be no phones in clubs, now phones almost everywhere, and no denim, but, simulated denim, and no open-toed shoes, but, Roman sandals. And clubs are having to change, and there's conflict, and there are people who are coming to clubs that just have way different value sets than the clubs they're trying to join. And it's strange. But I think it's causing friction, and I think some of it's avoidable. So that's a neat part of it is hearing, no, we're definitely better off having this here, Paul, having it in place. It's cool. Nice.
Hope you all enjoyed that episode. I found all of that so fascinating. If you're interested in talking with Paul, I'll put his information down below. Let him know you heard about them on Private Club Radio, and he has a special gift for you. If you're enjoying the content here on Private Club Radio, we would love and appreciate any support you can give by sharing, subscribing, rating. Nothing is too big or small, and we truly appreciate the support. Until next time, catch you on the flippity flip.